My name is Olivia Brooks, and I'll never forget the day my parents shattered every illusion I had about family. It was a chilly Saturday afternoon in Boston. I remember because I had just finished a long work week at the marketing firm where I'd been pushing myself to the limit. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "Olivia, come over this evening. We need to talk. It's important." At first, I thought it was something routine, maybe a family dinner, maybe some casual updates about my younger brother Ethan's new job or my sister Lily's latest college project. But something about the wording stuck with me. It's important. My mother wasn't the kind of woman to add unnecessary weight to her words. A cold knot formed in my stomach, but I brushed it off, convincing myself it couldn't be anything serious. I drove to their house, the same suburban home I had poured thousands of dollars into maintaining over the years. The shutters, the garden, even the new roof. I had helped fund it all without complaint. That house wasn't just their home. It was my investment in them, in us, in the idea of family. When I walked in, the air felt strange. My parents were sitting stiffly on the couch, side by side, like they were preparing for a courtroom hearing. My siblings were there too, lounging casually, as if they already knew what was coming. Ethan gave me a smirk that instantly set off alarms in my head. "Olivia, sit down," my father said, his voice unusually formal. I lowered myself into the armchair across from them, heart pounding. My mother cleared her throat. "We've been working on something important. Your father and I wanted you here to hear it directly from us." I nodded, waiting. She took a deep breath. "We finalized our will last week. Everything, the house, the savings, the retirement funds, will go to Ethan and Lily." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. Surely this was a joke, some twisted attempt at testing my reaction. "I'm sorry, what?" My father leaned forward, his expression grim but steady. "We've decided to leave everything to your brother and sister. You have your career, Olivia. You're independent. You don't need it the way they do." For a moment, the room spun. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. The words didn't make sense. I had spent over a decade being their safety net. When bills piled up, I paid them. When emergencies struck, I bailed them out. I was the one who stayed behind when my friends were traveling the world or buying homes of their own. And now, after everything, I was the one being cut out completely. "You're serious?" I finally managed to say, my voice shaking. "Of course," my mother replied, almost casually. "It's only fair. Ethan's business still hasn't taken off, and Lily has student loans. You've always been the strong one. You don't need our help." I laughed bitterly. "Your help? Do you hear yourselves? I've been your help for years. Whose money paid off the second mortgage when Dad's hours were cut? Who covered Lily's tuition when her scholarships didn't cover it all? Who sent Ethan money every single time his startup failed?" Their eyes darted away, but their silence spoke louder than words. And then Ethan chimed in, his tone dripping with smugness. "Come on, Liv. Don't be dramatic. You make good money. You'll be fine. Why fight us over something you don't even need?" That was the moment something inside me cracked. My brother, who had never worked a steady job, who had lived off excuses and handouts, had the audacity to tell me I didn't deserve fairness. My sister, sitting quietly with her eyes glued to her phone, didn't even bother to look up. The betrayal wasn't just in my parents' decision, it was in the collective silence of the family I had sacrificed for. "I can't believe this," I whispered, my throat tightening. "I gave you everything. My time, my money, my loyalty. And this is what I get? Nothing." "You have a future," my father said firmly. "You'll make more money. You'll always land on your feet. They need this more than you do." It was like being stabbed with words. My sacrifices had been erased, rewritten into some twisted narrative where I was the selfish one for wanting fairness. The walls felt like they were closing in, every memory of family dinners and birthdays suddenly soured by this single revelation. I stood up, my legs trembling but my resolve hardening. You know what? Keep it. Keep all of it. But don't you dare pretend this is about fairness or need. This is about you never valuing me the way you valued them. You used me because I was reliable. And now you've discarded me because I don't play the victim card. My mother's face hardened. Olivia, don't turn this into a fight. Family is family. This is about love. I shook my head slowly. No, this isn't about love. This is about control. And you've just proven you never loved me the way you claimed you did. The room went silent. Ethan smirked again, like he had won some invisible battle. Lily kept scrolling, detached from the reality unraveling in front of her. My parents looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I walked toward the door, my heart pounding but my chest strangely lighter with each step. As I gripped the doorknob, I turned back one last time. You may have cut me out of your will, but today, I cut myself out of this family. And that's worth more than anything you could ever leave behind. The slam of the door behind me echoed in my ears as I stepped into the cold evening air. For the first time, I wasn't Olivia the provider, the fixer, the dependable daughter. I was just Olivia Brooks, betrayed, but no longer blind. And little did I know that betrayal would mark the beginning of a freedom I had never dared to imagine. Looking back now, I realize that betrayal doesn't come out of nowhere. It builds over years, brick by brick, hidden behind the smiles, the thank yous, and the empty promises. For me, it started in my early 20s, fresh out of college, full of ambition and hope. While most of my friends were busy chasing dreams, traveling, and living freely, I was carrying a weight no one ever saw. My parents never asked directly, not at first. It began subtly, an unexpected bill here, an emergency expense there. Olivia, you're the one with a good job, my mother would say, her voice calm but laced with expectation. Can you cover this just until we get back on our feet? At first, I didn't mind. They had raised me, after all. Helping them out felt natural, like returning the favor for everything they'd given me. I paid the electric bill one month, helped with groceries the next, and slowly, without realizing it, I became their safety net. By the time I turned 25, I was paying part of the mortgage. Just a few months, my father promised. Once things settle down, we'll handle it ourselves. But months turned into years. My paychecks went straight from my account to theirs, leaving me with just enough to cover rent, food, and gas. And then came my siblings. Ethan, my younger brother, was the dreamer. He jumped from one startup idea to the next, convinced that each one would make him a millionaire. When the first failed, my parents begged me to help him get back on his feet. He just needs a little support, they said. So I wrote the check, then another, and another. Before long, Ethan wasn't just depending on my parents' approval, he was depending on my wallet. Lily, my younger sister, was no better. She was the golden child, the baby of the family, the one who could do no wrong. When she got into her dream college, the celebration was loud and endless. But when the tuition bills arrived, reality set in. Scholarships covered part of it, but the rest? Olivia, she can't miss this opportunity, my mother pleaded. You know how smart she is. Please, just this once. Just this once became 4 years. I worked overtime, skipped vacations, and cut corners on my own life to make sure Lily graduated without drowning in debt. I told myself it was worth it, that one day she would appreciate the sacrifices I had made. But appreciation never came. Instead, it became an expectation. If Ethan failed again, Olivia would cover him. If Lily needed books, Olivia would pay. If the house needed repairs, Olivia would write the check. I remember one Christmas in particular. I had been saving up for months, planning to buy myself a new laptop. Mine was nearly a decade old, slow and unreliable, but I always put myself last. 2 days before Christmas, my father called. The furnace broke down. We need to replace it immediately. Can you help? I hesitated, the thought of finally doing something for myself tugging at me. But then I imagined them shivering in the cold, struggling without heat. I transferred the money that night, quietly letting go of the gift I had planned for myself. On Christmas morning, they thanked me with warm smiles, but I could see it in their eyes. It wasn't gratitude. It was expectation. Year after year, the pattern continued. My friends invited me on trips to Europe, to road trips across the states, to simple weekend getaways. I always said no. I can't afford it, I'd lie, even though the truth was I could have, if I wasn't carrying my family on my back. I watched from the sidelines as everyone built their lives, while mine revolved around keeping others afloat. I dated, too, but relationships never lasted. Men grew frustrated when I canceled dinners because I had to send money home, or when I admitted I couldn't take a vacation because my savings were gone again. Eventually, I stopped trying. Who would want someone whose life was already claimed by other people's needs? There was one night, about 5 years ago, that still burns in my memory. I had worked a 60-hour week, exhausted to the bone. My rent was due, my car needed repairs, and I had barely enough left to cover it all. That's when my mother called, her voice trembling. "Olivia, your father's hours were cut again. We don't know how we'll pay the mortgage this month. Can you help?" I wanted to scream, to tell her I had nothing left to give. Instead, I swallowed my pain and said yes. I pulled out my credit card, sinking deeper into debt, also they could breathe a little easier. That night, I cried myself to sleep, wondering if anyone would ever notice how much I was breaking. And yet, I kept going. I kept paying. I kept sacrificing. Because somewhere deep down, I believed that love was tied to sacrifice, that if I gave enough, one day they would see me, value me, love me for more than just my ability to solve their problems. But I was wrong. Love shouldn't come with a price tag. Family shouldn't measure your worth by how much you can provide. I didn't see it then, but I see it clearly now. I was never the daughter. I was the safety net, the ATM, the backup plan. Those silent years of sacrifice were supposed to earn me love and respect. Instead, they earned me betrayal. When my parents sat me down and told me they will left everything to Ethan and Lily, it wasn't just a shock. It was the final proof that in their eyes, I was never truly part of the family. I was just the tool they used to build everyone else's future, while mine was left behind in the shadows. And that realization hurt more than any empty bank account ever could. The night I discovered the truth about the will, something inside me shattered. For years, I had convinced myself that all the sacrifices would eventually mean something, that my parents would recognize my loyalty, my dedication, my love. But instead, they looked me in the eye and said that everything I had worked for, everything I had carried, belonged to Ethan and Lily, not to me. I drove home in silence that evening, the headlights blurring through my tears. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Every mile felt heavier than the last, until I finally pulled into my apartment complex and collapsed against the seat. My chest heaved with sobs I had been holding back for years, but grief quickly turned into rage. For once in my life, I wasn't sad about what I had lost. I was furious about what had been stolen. That week, the manipulation began. At first, it came in whispers, soft phone calls from my mother, pretending that nothing had happened. "Olivia, sweetheart, don't be upset. We only want what's fair. You have a good career. You don't need more money. Your brother and sister, they need this more than you do." Fair. That word echoed in my mind like poison. Was it fair when I paid their mortgage while Ethan wasted money on failed businesses? Was it fair when I worked overtime to pay Lily's tuition while she partied with her friends? Was it fair when I gave up my own life so they could live theirs? Then came the guilt trips. Aunts and uncles I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly flooded my phone with messages. "Olivia, family is everything. Don't throw it away over money. Your parents sacrificed so much for you. How could you be so ungrateful? Blood is thicker than water. Don't forget who raised you." I laughed bitterly at those words. None of them had ever seen the years I spent scraping by, The nights I cried myself to sleep after wiring my last dollar to my parents. None of them knew how many dreams I had buried to keep this family afloat. And now, they dared to call me ungrateful? The final straw came one evening when Ethan showed up unannounced at my apartment. He stood in the doorway, his expression smug, as if he already knew he'd win whatever battle he had come to start. "You're making a scene, Olivia," he said, leaning casually against the doorframe. "You're acting childish. Mom and Dad just want what's best for all of us." My blood boiled. Childish. That was the word he chose. After everything I had done, after years of covering his failures, he had the audacity to call me childish. "You think I'm childish?" I snapped, my voice shaking with fury. "You've lived your entire life off my hard work. You've never held a stable job, never paid your own bills, and yet I'm the selfish one." Ethan rolled his eyes. "You're overreacting. It's just money. You're doing fine, so why does it matter?" "Because it's not about the money," I shouted, my voice echoing through the hallway. "It's about respect. It's about the years I gave up for this family while all of you treated me like a bank account. It's about being told I don't matter, that no matter how much I give, I'll never be enough." For the first time, Ethan didn't have a comeback. His smirk faltered, and he muttered something under his breath before walking away. That night, I made a decision. I was done being used. Done being manipulated. Done being the savior for people who would never save me. The very next morning, I logged into my bank account and cancelled every automatic transfer that went to my parents. I blocked Ethan's number. I blocked Lily's. When my mother called, I let it ring. Of course, they didn't give up easily. Days later, my phone buzzed again, this time with messages from distant relatives who had clearly been fed lies. My mother's narrative was spreading quickly. Olivia, the greedy daughter, abandoning her poor aging parents. But instead of breaking me, it lit a fire inside me. I was tired of being silent, tired of letting them control the story. So, I opened my laptop and wrote everything. I wrote about the decade of sacrifices, the money I had poured into their lives, the nights I cried myself to sleep while they thrived on my earnings. I wrote about the betrayal of the will, about how they cut me out because I dared to stop being their ATM. I hit post, and for the first time, my truth was out in the open. Within hours, my phone exploded with notifications. Some people called me brave, others called me selfish, but for once, I didn't care. The truth was out there, and nothing they could say would change it. Later that evening, my mother called, her voice sharp with rage. "Olivia, what the hell do you think you're doing? You're destroying this family's reputation." I held the phone to my ear, calm and steady. "No, Mom. I'm destroying the lies. You destroyed this family when you decided I was only valuable for what I could give you." There was silence on the line. Then, her voice dropped, low and threatening. "You're going to regret this." I smiled bitterly. "No, Mom. For the first time in my life, I don't regret anything." I hung up, and with that, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The years of silent sacrifice, the guilt, the manipulation, it all dissolved in that single moment. For the first time, I had set a boundary. For the first time, I had chosen myself. And I knew one thing for certain, there was no turning back. Walking away from my family wasn't a single moment. It was a process. It began with that phone call I ended, my mother's furious voice still echoing in my ears. When I pressed the red button and silenced her threats, I knew the line between us had finally snapped. For the first time in decades, I had chosen myself over them. But freedom is never free. At first, it was quiet. Too quiet. 4 years, my phone had been buzzing constantly with demands, requests, and guilt-laced conversations. Now, it sat silent on my nightstand. Some nights, the silence was peaceful. Other nights, it was suffocating. I'd stare at the dark ceiling above me, my mind whispering questions I didn't want to face. What if they are right? What if I am selfish? What if walking away makes me just as cruel as they claim? The emptiness wasn't just emotional. It was physical. Holidays that were once spent in chaotic family gatherings were suddenly lonely. Thanksgiving came, and instead of a crowded table with laughter and forced smiles, I sat alone in my apartment with a store-bought meal. Christmas lights glowed faintly outside my window, but inside, it was just me and the quiet hum of the heater. For a while, it hurt. It felt like I had amputated a part of myself, like something vital was missing. Family, even toxic family, had been my anchor for so long. Cutting them off left me floating, directionless. But then something incredible began to happen. Slowly, the silence stopped feeling like punishment. It began to feel like peace. Without constant financial drains, my bank account started to grow. For the first time in years, I wasn't scrambling to cover someone else's bills. I paid my rent on time without fear, repaired my car without guilt, and even started setting money aside for myself. Each deposit into my savings felt like reclaiming a little piece of my stolen life. I rediscovered small joys I had long forgotten. On Saturdays, instead of wiring money home, I wandered through farmers' markets, sipping fresh coffee and trying foods I'd never tasted before. On weeknights, instead of crying over unpaid credit cards, I signed up for a photography class, a passion I had abandoned in college because I was too busy working overtime. The first time I lifted that camera again, I felt alive. The click of the shutter was more than just capturing a picture, it was capturing freedom. And then came travel. For years, I had listened to my friends tell stories of their adventures in Europe, the hikes through national parks, their spontaneous road trips. I had always smiled politely, hiding the ache of envy in my chest. But now, I didn't have to just listen. 3 months after cutting ties, I booked a flight to Paris. Standing at the edge of the Seine River, the Eiffel Tower glowing in the distance, I realized I wasn't carrying anyone else's burdens anymore. The only weight I felt was my own camera bag slung over my shoulder, and it was a weight I chose. From Paris, I went to Rome, then to Machu Picchu, then across the US to national parks I'd always dreamed of visiting. With every step, with every breathtaking view, the chains of my old life fell away piece by piece. Of course, my family noticed. Even though I had blocked them, whispers found their way back to me. My mother had taken a job as a waitress. My father was working long hours at a construction supply store. Ethan, without my money, had abandoned his latest failed business venture. Lily was struggling to maintain her glamorous social media persona without someone funding her lifestyle. A year earlier, those updates would have filled me with guilt. Now, they only confirmed what I already knew. They had never needed me. They had only needed what I could provide. Without me, they weren't helpless. They were just forced to finally live their own lives. And for once, their struggles didn't belong to me. There were still moments of doubt, of course. Old habits die hard. When I heard they were struggling financially, part of me wanted to reach for my wallet, to play the role I had always played. But then I remembered the night they told me I wasn't worthy of being included in the will. I remembered the smugness in Ethan's voice, the coldness in my mother's eyes, the silence of my father. And I reminded myself, they chose this. They chose to erase me. All I did was accept it. Freedom came with a cost, loneliness, grief, and the void of what family should have been. But every cost was worth it, because what I gained was far greater. I gained mornings where I woke up without dread, evenings where I poured myself a glass of wine and celebrated small victories that were mine alone, weekends where I didn't check my bank balance in fear. I gained my voice, my boundaries, my future, and slowly, I began to build connections that weren't based on obligation or guilt. Friends who celebrated me for who I was, not for what I could provide. Colleagues who respected me for my talent, not for my willingness to sacrifice. People who saw Olivia Brooks, not Olivia the ATM. I realized something powerful during that time. Sometimes, freedom doesn't come with applause. Sometimes, it comes with silence. But in that silence, you find yourself. I had spent years giving away pieces of myself until there was nothing left. Now, I was finally whole. For the first time in my life, I wasn't responsible for anyone but me. And it felt better than any inheritance ever could. When people talk about fresh starts, they often imagine a grand event, moving to a new city, winning the lottery, or meeting the love of their life. For me, my fresh start didn't come with fireworks. It began quietly, with a simple truth. I was finally free. Freedom gave me space to grow, but empowerment came when I realized I could rewrite my own story. The old Olivia Brooks had been a caretaker, a fixer, the responsible one. She was the daughter who always showed up, the sister who always paid, the woman who sacrificed everything for others. But that Olivia was gone. She had been buried the day my parents looked me in the eye and told me I didn't matter enough to be included in their will. The new Olivia didn't beg for love. She didn't bend under guilt. She didn't apologize for existing. At first, empowerment showed up in small ways. Saying no to extra work hours when I was exhausted. Refusing to answer messages that dripped with manipulation. Choosing clothes that reflected my personality instead of what others expected. These little rebellions felt insignificant at first, but together they built a foundation for something bigger, a life that belonged entirely to me. Professionally, things began to change too. 4 years, my career had been a backdrop to my family drama. Every paycheck went toward their needs. Every promotion was overshadowed by new financial demands. But now, with my energy focused on myself, I thrived. I poured my creativity into my job, finally daring to pitch ideas I used to keep silent about. One of those ideas landed me a leadership opportunity. Standing in front of a conference room full of colleagues, presenting my vision with confidence, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was succeeding. And success brought new people into my life, people who respected me for what I could do, not what I could give. I built friendships rooted in authenticity, not obligation. Dinners where laughter replaced tension. Conversations where I was listened to, not used. These connections became the family I had always longed for. Then, unexpectedly, love found its way back into my life. I wasn't looking for it. In fact, I had sworn off relationships for a while, determined to heal before opening my heart again. But sometimes, the best things arrive when you least expect them. I met him at a charity event, a place I wouldn't have been if I hadn't reclaimed my weekends. He was kind, attentive, and most importantly, he saw me. Not as someone to lean on, not as someone to exploit, but as an equal. Our conversations flowed easily, filled with curiosity and warmth. With him, I learned that love didn't have to come with conditions, that I didn't have to shrink myself to be accepted, that I could be valued, cherished, and respected all at once. This wasn't a fairy tale. There were challenges, of course. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. But every day, I reminded myself that I deserved this. I deserved kindness, partnership, and joy. And slowly, I began to believe it. Looking back, it's almost poetic. My parents thought cutting me out of their will was a punishment. They believed they were erasing me from their legacy. But in reality, they set me free. By losing them, I gained myself. By being betrayed, I discovered my own strength. By being erased, I learned to write my own story. If they had left me a share of their estate, I might have stayed trapped in their web of control forever. I might have continued living for their approval, chained to their manipulation. Instead, being cut off forced me to stand on my own. It was the hardest lesson of my life, but also the most valuable. Now, when I think about the future, I don't see fear. I see possibility. I see travels I haven't taken yet, dreams I haven't pursued, chapters one haven't written. And most importantly, I see a life that is mine. To anyone listening who has ever felt betrayed by family, I want you to hear me. You are not defined by their choices. You are not worthless just because someone else failed to see your value. Sometimes, the greatest gift is losing the people who never deserved you in the first place. Today, I am Olivia Brooks, not the forgotten daughter, not the excluded sibling, not the family scapegoat. I am a woman who survived betrayal and built a life stronger, brighter, and freer than I ever imagined. And maybe that's the real inheritance I was meant to have all along. So I'll leave you with this question. If you were in my shoes, if your family cut you out completely, would you fight to stay, or would you walk away and create your own legacy?